It's Twitch. It is nearly 12 o'clock Central Standard Time, and that means here for Green Oaks Gaming, we are going to be live in the studio doing some painting. You can see on the table here on the main screen, sun is coming in really bright. Great lighting, although it competes a lot with the shadows. So luckily, we're just doing some speed painting. Well, I guess not really speed painting, but we're doing some limited painting here on some wonderful Reaper miniatures. These are just a number of townsfolk. And we've got, for the majority of them, we've got them to a good spot. We've got some leather to do for the majority of them. Now, while doing the townsfolk, we did have some that are a little fancier, have a little bit more going on, like the tax collector here. We've got a madam here. So you can see they are not quite as far, this wonderful merchant here. So those ones are going to require a lot more paint, in my opinion. I want them to really stand out from the general villagers. But for the villagers alone, we have really kept it a very kind of dull overall palette. So we've kept it very brown and tan, and then just a splash of blues so that they are easy to see on the table and kind of tied in together, but they're not going to stand out on the table compared to our players' miniatures, and that's the goal. I want these to be able to be popped into any table campaign that I'm running, nice and easy without standing out, and just giving that sense of the down-to-earth villager aspect. So because we've got a lot of the aspects done, I've really got, with the majority of them, just leathers yet to do. So almost all of them have a belt and a pouch and boots. Some of them have some buckles that we will do some non-metallic metal on. Maybe we may actually do some metallics on these just to expedite the painting process, but I don't know, we will see. For the aspects that we're going to be painting, I'm just going to use my leathers, which I have a lot of them in triads. And I'm not going to go super crazy on them, just using the triads to get through them and paint up some leather on them. And I'm going to start with ruddy leather. And a little bit of shake to my hands, so I don't know if I'm going to be able to do the leather. I may have to switch it up to something else. We will see. I always try to tell people, don't press yourself. If you're doing something like handshakes, change it up and do something that you know confidently you'll be able to do really, really well. So move to a bust or a larger mini, or go to your spray booth and put on some base coats on some miniatures with your airbrush, and keep it really simple. It's better to go slow and just take on bite-sized pieces that you know you can accomplish, rather than getting frustrated for messing up. So we'll see. I'm not doing too bad here, sticking with the belts primarily. So feeling pretty good. Now a lot of these you can see I'm not using my handle, which I should be, but I'm not, just because I am trying to get through these miniatures pretty quick. And for these base coats, it's more time to change it out for a fast paint job like this. So that's why the more fancy ones are on the handle and set for the handles, rather than just all of them. I did have all of them on bottle tops to start when I first started painting them, but changing them in and out was just taking so long comparatively. So I decided to just take them off the bottle tops. I was using white tack on some of them, so it's not as good as blue tack. So they weren't holding on the bases quite as firm. I really swear by blue tack and try to use it. I just don't have a whole ton of it. So there are limits to my blue tack and what I can have blue tacked for a handle top. And then I go with white poster tack, should I need it. Generally I use that when I'm just kind of roughly holding pieces together. And this is just the ruddy brown. I'm just doing a base coat because I'm going over white. I did the initial base coat in linen white on these because I wanted them to be fairly bright in color and tone. But sometimes painting over white is a little bit more challenging. So my base coats are a little bit thin, or I'm sorry, my initial paint tones that I'm putting on are a little bit thin. So some of that white is showing through. So it may take a couple of layers, but that is okay. I would rather take 2 layers of thinner paint than glob it on and lose the detail, even though there isn't like a whole ton. I don't want to glob it on and have it disappear, basically. And my plan is just to work from one side to the next. I'll move these off to one side, and when I start the next layer, I'll move them to the other side. That way I can kind of keep track of where I'm at, what I've got left to do. I hope everybody had a fantastic week this week. It was a little long on my end. I was definitely having ReaperCon withdrawals, but it was pretty good. I did enjoy, I don't know if you caught Reaperland with John on Friday. They did it a mobile Reaperland. I thought it was a lot of fun. Basically, he took the handheld and walked around and did a lot. He did some maraca hunting and took us down one of the slides at the Reaper factory and talked to a lot of the employees, and just a good time. I really enjoyed it. Nice change of pace from your standard Reaperland, so I thought it was fun. Kudos to John for thinking outside the box a little bit and doing something a little different. Sometimes it's really nice to have that bit of change of pace. This week I have got a birthday for my wife Tammy, who is my nerd enabler. She has a birthday coming up this week. Generally every year I take her birthday off, just so in case she wants to go and do anything or just spend the time at home relaxing and enjoying. But she was not able to take the day off, so she has to work and I have her day off. I have some guilt on that. I'm not going to lie, I really have some guilt on that because it's her birthday. But maybe for her birthday, we'll do a stream on that day and work a little bit on one of the miniatures that she got. I have this wonderful Moonlight Minis sculpt that she got me at ReaperCon. I have been doing a lot of looking up some inspiration photos. So maybe we'll go through and talk about those inspiration photos. That's going to be on the 21st. So maybe we'll plan for that. We'll see as we get closer. I believe that's a Wednesday. But then I've also got my regular job that I had been working this week. And that was a lot of fun. I got to work a lot on CADs, which kind of burnt me out. Work on a couple of presentations coming up for some future seasons. Spring 24, I'm working on Spring 24, if you can believe it. So you can see on some of these, well, on all of them so far actually, I am not doing the boots the same colors that I'm doing the belts. And the reason is these belts, I want them to be like treated leather, heavy leather belts. So these are starting with this ruddy leather, and then we'll go through highlighting on them brighter and brighter, lighter and lighter for like wear patterns and such. And the boots and pouches and everything, I'm going to start with leather brown so that they look like a softer leather. Here's my Villager Jesus. This guy, I'm gonna call him Villager Jesus. I love that hair and the mustache and everything. Well, he doesn't have like a beard like you often see Jesus portrayed as having a beard, which would make sense for the time, and of course he was a Jewish person, and oftentimes Jewish men do have beards. This guy, I think it's just the hair and the pose, kind of open pose of hand on his heart kind of out, or his other hand kind of outstretched a little bit. Maybe I'll make him a shepherd. I don't know. I don't have any sheep minis. Well, this young boy has a, or girl. For me, I keep saying boy because I have actually used this miniature in a campaign already before he was even painted. Just in the Bones Gray, I used him for an NPC that I actually was kind of hoping my players would really get attached to, because the story that I have for this NPC is fantastic. It's great. But they just did not get attached to him at all. They were like more annoyed with it, like, get out of here, you're just a kid. So it backfired on me. As a GM, I was like, oh, it's just time to take him away. Bring him back to the painting table and call it a day. Now this ruddy leather you may think is a little competitive with the strong browns, And in many aspects it really is. As we go through and do highlighting, it will change the dynamic though. And the tone itself is a lot more red than the browns that we used before. They have a lot more yellow tone to them. So up close, there definitely is differentiation from the belt to like this one's dress. But I don't know how that reads on camera. I'm trying to be as soft-handed as possible because these are not yet sealed. My goal is to work on these on stream for about an hour and then actually seal them up. If I can get the leather components done, then I can just give them a quick seal. So that as I'm painting other aspects of them, i.e. belt buckles, anything like that, I can hold them without worrying about rubbing off paint. And I should be using my handle. I do know better. Well, this area is actually a little bit more challenging. Good tipped brush. Here I am using my Reaper. This is a synthetic size 1. And I find it does really good for me. So this one just needs boots. I'm going to move him back to the back a little bit. Since he does not need any belt work, I'm not going to be using the ruddy leathers on him at all. So I've been working on and off now for a bit on my next big campaign. Planning on starting it sometime after the new year. I've still got quite a bit of work to go on it, but I have got a working title and actually just kind of gave a first indicator to it in a Facebook post about a week and a half ago. And for me, these types of campaigns are a lot of fun. It is planned to go a level 1 to 20. The challenge that I have is when I'm doing these campaigns, I try to make it very, very clear and apparent that this is a long-term campaign. And I really push for a lot of feedback and input and no, I hate to say commitment, but commitment from possible players. And it can be challenging for, especially because I like to target newer players when I'm doing a new campaign, because like this, because I've gotten a chance to meet a lot of good gamers in the community, but I see so many posts of new interested people who are looking at getting into gaming. I see their posts all the time and I want to give them a chance to play, but oftentimes as I post, I try to make it very clear what I'm looking for, what they can see at the table, the experience that I hope to bring. And there are times where I wonder if a lot of new players don't really realize for a long-term campaign what it takes from the player's aspect. So good, bad, indifferent, I don't know. I just know that the last time that I did this, well, ended up with a good group. I started out with 32 people contacting me saying, hey, I'm interested, I'm interested, I'm interested, which I thought was great. I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to break this up into 2 campaigns with this much interest. And so that was my plan as I started working out into having bi-weekly game nights rather than weekly. I started splitting it out, tried to balance from half of the players being experienced and half being new. That way it wasn't so daunting for both new and experienced, but a good blend of both. And as we started drawing closer to the timeline, I mean, they just started dropping out like flies. Primarily the newer players who had shown interest, just because I did say, hey, this is going to be bi-weekly. At that time I had decided to split it out into 2 campaigns. We'll play every other weeknight from this time to approximately this time. I don't anticipate it going late. However, there may be occasions where it does. And not like crazy times either. I was really dialing in for a 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock. So it didn't go too late for people with kids. It wasn't too early for people getting off work. They'd be able to go home and grab a bite to eat and see the family. And so that worked good. But then a lot of them, I talked about having the first session when we talk a little bit about the beginning of the campaign, where everybody is going to be and everything. And that's when we'll do character creation. But a lot of them were not happy with that. I don't know, maybe I'm past my time or something, but nobody wanted to wait to make characters together. So I just find that interesting for a campaign setting, is different than like an adventure league or one-shots, anything like that. So it was just interesting. But long story short, I suppose, let me get the long story short. I was able to go through and weed out to where I just had one group. We were going to be able to play weekly, and it was a little bit of a larger group, but not too bad. I think we started with 8, and then just through regular attrition, which I always anticipate. People move, people change jobs. There are things that come up. People can have kids, all different kinds of things. I never anticipate, everybody has to drop everything for a game. I try to be really relaxed on, if the majority of people can't make it, we'll punt and then pick up, because there are times where I get sick or I've got to travel for work or whatever, and I have to punt. But just through regular attrition, we got down to a very comfortable 7. And that one was not a super long campaign. I only anticipated that getting to 11th. So kind of the final piece was 10th level. But then I do a lot of shorter campaigns for people who are newer to the game. I want a long campaign. I love long campaigns. The last really good long campaign I had, the group was the Brotherhood, the Silver Brotherhood. The players really played well. Characters were so interesting. And that one was actually kind of accidental as well, because I initially intended just a shorter campaign, like Tier 1, to just assemble players. And when we got through that first tier, everybody was really enjoying it. So I was like, well, we'll keep going. We'll go until we get to second tier. And that was my planned, like, secondary stop point. And everybody approached me and said, hey, we're having so good, can we continue these characters in the story through to level 20? That was definitely a rewarding moment as a DM. And you live for things like that. So I was like, yeah, let's do it, let's do it, let's do it. And so I took those characters up to level 20. And what do you know? They saved not only the region and the realm, but the world. But again, that was like accidental, so it was very different. Oh, hello, hello, how are you doing today? Just painting some villagers, trying to muck through. I went through and picked up some supplies. I've got some, well, I've got so much on my desk, but I have got a couple that have been just taunting me for some more scenic display bases. So I went and picked up some supplies to start working on some display bases today. And I'm super stoked to start those. Generally, as I prep up the miniature, I'll take it out of the package, give it a good scrubbing, eyeball it for an hour, just thinking, and then work on mold lines, and if I need to remove it from its base and pin, anything like that, I'll work on that. And at the same time, I'm working on the base itself. So it's a lot of fun, and component-wise, I got some really cool, of course, just the wood plaques. I look for ones with really good texture, so that when I sand it and stain it, that really has something to add to the miniature base. I was really disappointed, so I went to Hobby Lobby for, initially, I wanted to get wood blocks, right? I love using wood blocks for bases. They sand up really nice, and then when you stain them and everything, you build up a really decorative aspect. So generally I get a couple of 1.5 inch and 2 inch so that I have an assortment. But these ones here, the 4-pack, there were a couple with some good, some good texture to them. But I couldn't buy them single. They don't sell them single anymore. And all I wanted was 2 1.5 inch and 1 2 inch. Same with the plaques, the wood plaques. They don't sell them anymore individually, just in multi-packs. So it was a little disappointing. Again, just because I wanted to do some mix and match rather than just the rectangular, the squared corner rectangular. I wanted to get an oval, I wanted to get just a straight square, and I wanted to get a rectangle. But because they only had the multi-packs, I had to just buy a couple of what I wanted. So it was kind of disappointing, but that's okay. I'm not going to cry about it anymore. All right, so we've got our base coat on. I'm just going to go through and look and see how well it adhered to it. I mean, there are a couple of spots where it's thin. I'm going to go through and do just another coat of that ruddy leather before I go into oiled leather. So, again, this is using Reaper's MSP paints. I really love these because the consistency flow is really, really good and consistent bottle to bottle, color to color. But they also look at how to do good tonal blends. So your triads play really well together. You don't have to do a whole lot of mixing. If you're doing things for tabletop, like these miniatures here are all just for tabletop, you don't have to overthink formulas. I mean, you can just put them on your palette, paint, and go. And just going through, making sure that my first layer is nice and opaque. I want a good opaque layer to build. And I'm really looking more at the center area of all these elements. The belts, any of them that have the cuffs. Because the ends, the edges, we will do a lot of the oiled leather to start giving it that worn look. check our little pitch. So in the campaign that I was using this little fellow in, that was one of his names was Titch. He had a couple of names that he was being called. He was being called Stu by one group of people. He was being called Titch by another one. And I was hoping that the players got intrigued on why is everybody calling him different names. You know, he was in the way. He was just in the way. Whereas this party that I have now, it's like on the borderline. You can tell there are a couple of players who are very used to murder hobo scenarios. And then a couple others that just aren't like as outgoing. So a couple of these plot points that that I popped in just didn't yet, anyhow, haven't gone anywhere. We'll see if they come back up. This last session was pretty intense. We had to end on a cliffhanger mid-combat. It's because of timing for this last week, but they are fighting an avatar of Bhaal, and they have not been able to do much damage to it. And it is still kicking pretty strong, and a couple of them are pretty low on HP. Had to use a couple of greater healing spells, and one of them even had to use a potion, which is funny because the last campaign that they were in, they hoarded their potions and stuff. Didn't have to use too much magic for healing and stuff. So it's very different for many of them. But interesting to see. Sometimes those challenges that you put down really make a difference. But it didn't help either that they split the party. So they were one person shy initially, just like overall. And then another one was watching from a distance and didn't see what was going on. So they've got, took them a while to get together. And in that time, they have just been taking some big hits. So now that they are starting to kind of form up, one character who died in another area brought in their backup character to join the party. As they went in after the avatar, the others were just starting to form up to talk about teleporting out. It's going to be interesting to see what the next session brings. And of course, with any party, you can't plan on anything. You just can't plan on anything. So you can plan, but it doesn't come to fruition. And just about done with our ruddy leather here. And when you're painting leather, the most important aspect is the center area. While you do want good coverage all around, so you get those edges as well, for your initial dark tone, the center is the most important aspect. I've seen some people who will do this and they'll paint initially and then do washes, and I've seen good results with that too. I have done that a couple of times, depending on the leather that I'm painting. Again, the most important thing is you want the center or areas away from wear to be darker than the edges and places where you'll have that leather wear. There was a time where I painted, I don't know, 30 miniatures leather on 30 miniatures just to practice, and I spent, I don't know, 2.5 months only painting leather just to try out a couple of different techniques to see what I liked the best. And I would paint and then strip, and then paint and then strip. I did that for a long time just to get a feeling for leather. At Instagram, looking at everything from leather belts to leather jackets to leather cloaks, leather shields. I was just looking up everything I could on different leathers. Just because initially I did not like the way my leather painting was coming out. So lots and lots of research, lots and lots of time. I've actually burnt through a lot of that already. So I'm going to do, I don't have many to go, so I'm just going to do a little partial bit there on the palette. Finish out these last couple. Still pretty shaky on my hands. That's okay. Not so bad that I don't think we'll be able to do these leather belts and such well. A couple of them with they're more cuffs than actual like van braces. And I thought about keeping them material, but I like the thought of having those cuffs be leather as well. A little bit more just for decoration than anything else. All right, so that is our base coat. So when we're working on leather, the biggest technique that I tell people is stippling, how important stippling is. So now I'm going into oiled leather, and what I want to do is, I'm going to hope that that does a good job. On the edges, I'm going to do completely, I want to go through and just stipple on this oiled leather. I'm using this bigger brush that's got a little bit of separation because I want this to be kind of jagged and torn up. I don't want this to be smooth lines. I want this to look like cracked leather. And by doing this stippling, it is giving me a lot of variation in the placement of those stipples. And as we continue to build up our coloring, that will look like good worn dyed leather. So a couple of spots I want to bring it down almost like veining and connect that top and bottom, and I don't want them to go perfectly vertical. I want them to go more diagonal, and I know that's probably hard to see on screen, but in person it makes a heck of a difference. This part here, because we did that base coat so well, this part here goes pretty fast. Because we're using less paint and we've got that good opaque base, we're able to get through this aspect of it pretty quick. These next couple of layers will go down pretty quick. Again, more on the edges. Think of where you're going to wear and bend. So this is just putting in this worn aspect. And then here on the scabbard, I'm going to do the same thing on the scabbard. As we move away from the top, I'm going to do a little bit more, and I'm just stippling this in here so that I've got good dark tones still showing. Now for the other aspects of the miniatures, you can start here. So I'm going to show you with the gloves on this miniature. I want these to be a little more, I want these to be like work gloves. I'm not going to do them the same tone as the boots. They're going to be a little more durable than the boots, but they're not going to be as durable as the belt. So I'm going to use my oiled leather here for this guy's gloves, and I think that we've got one more with gloves. The good thing about this is you're using the same color for multiple pieces. You can bang out a miniature, especially for the tabletop, pretty efficiently by just thinking about how you're utilizing some of these colors. And just like the previous, because this one is going directly over white, we'll just have to watch and see how the coverage goes. We may have to do another coat on this. We may not. We'll see. A lot of it just depends on the opacity and how well that first layer goes on. But I want to keep it nice and thin and then come back to it. The boots are not being this color because I want the boots to be a softer leather. So they will start with leather brown, which will be the last tone that we use on these belts. Belts and cuffs. And again, I want to keep the center part very dark. I don't want to cover up all that beautiful ruddy leather brown. I just want to edge with this oiled leather, put some veining in. To make it look good and worn. And again, the stippling technique works really good, especially if you've got a little bit older brush. So this is a different size one Reaper synthetic brush. And very little paint on the brush. You don't need much. You don't need much, because if you have too much paint, you're going to lay down too much. And one's here, like with the pouch. I'm going to do the pouch the same as the boots, a soft leather, so starting with leather brown. So just the belt, different stippling, connected a couple points, not many, but just a couple of points connected up and down. Get that edge really well. So when you go back through with the next one, when we put on some leather brown, we want to be able to cover about half of what we're doing. So don't make it too small, but don't make it too large. I know it sounds kind of crazy, but it really does. If you get a chance, check out some of my Instagram photos where some leather, both leather armor as well as just leather accents like belts and such. You can kind of zoom in and see if you'd like. And this is where, if you didn't get that good opacity on the first layer on the edges, remember I said focus more on the center aspects. This is where you want to just make sure you got good cover up. You're not seeing any white going through, or less translucency, I guess, in your darker brown shadow tone. Good stippling technique. Break it up. Don't leave it just a line. That will allow it to look more organic, which leather should be. I'm actually really looking forward to getting these villagers done. Because I've got a couple of other larger minis that are display minis. That I want to spend some time working on so I can get them a little bit further on. So the more of these that I can get knocked out, the better. I'm not an army painter. I'm not an army painter. I hate doing this type of repetitiveness. I would rather have multiple different figures going at the same time rather than a lot of the sameness. For my own sanity. But that's all right. That is all right. I don't mind. Part of me is just a glutton because even though these are just for tabletop, I cannot go through and just do like a single layer and a wash and then a dry brush. I don't know why. I can't do it. I've tried. I really have, but it bugs me so bad. So I go through and do a little bit better paint job than I probably need to for things like my NPCs. This guy here with his funky hat. I was going to do the hat more like a helmet. So do the non-metallic metal when I'm doing things like belt buckles. Get those all done and do this like a old helmet. and then he is going to be a retired guard or something along the lines. And he kept his helmet, and I'm going to use him like a nosy old neighbor. Back in my day, we listened to the officials. We kept our grass nice and short. We didn't raise any ruckuses. We didn't use any spells at the tavern. So I want him to be one of those annoying NPCs. But with some good information too. That way he doesn't get fireballed right out the bat. Alrighty. I know this aspect is pretty dull, takes a long time, but I guarantee you if you try it, you'll really like the results. The leather is, I mean, it just really does a number doing this type of technique. Really makes it look good, really makes it look nice and sharp, organic. So here on things like the scabbard, it's got a little bit of decoration at the top and bottom, so I make sure to leave some of that ruddy leather really showing. And then this guy, because he has got this hat, oh, I didn't do the blue on his scarf. Boy, I'm slacking. I am slacking. So here I was going to do the hat, a leather hat, and starting with the oil color. I'm going to real quick pop on his blue. So the blues I'm using is just the, oh, I used the wrong one here. I grabbed some clear blue. We don't want clear blue. We want ultramarine. Ultramarine shadow, ultramarine blue, and then ultramarine highlight is the colors that I'm using for the blues. I want these to be good dark blues that I can highlight up nice and well. Can't believe I missed this guy's scarf while I was painting blues. It's that I should switch brushes. I just grabbed I didn't change out from the stippling brush. So we'll see if I can pull this off. Ooh, barely. So I want to put this blue on and then some highlights so that I can use the oiled leather quickly to do the hat. So I'm actually going to move him back to the back because I know I'm going to have oiled leather to do. That guy does not need any oiled leather. That's right, he is back in the back, just not back far enough. Our wizened old man. I was saying in one of the streams earlier, for all of these NPCs, I don't know if anybody else does, but for me anyhow, the more I utilize the same like miniature for an NPC, the more that NPC retains that same personality. So I can have different campaigns, but if I use the same miniature, it's the same fellow. It could be a completely different timeline, a completely different world, but that NPC just gets a personality and I stick with it. these little detail aspects, well, they're not as interesting to watch. So I do apologize for that. But they are important, so I'm not going to skip them. My goal is to get these leather belts and cuffs or van braces, get all of these aspects done in our stream today. So we're not going to be able to get to the boots. I don't even know time-wise where are we at. Oh wow, yeah, that time is a going. So I doubt we'll be able to get to the boots, but process-wise is all exactly the same. We'll start out with leather brown and then just highlight up from there. Leather brown is a soft brown, so the boots will look comfortable but functional. And then we'll actually do a lot more highlighting on things like the boots, because these people, being the villagers, for the most part are going to be not as well off. So they'll have heavy weathering in their highlighting to denote heavier use. You can see with these minis, I did do lots of different hair colors. To break them up a little bit. Initially I was only going to do just brown hair. But I decided, no, let's break it up a little bit. Let's put some different hair colors in there. Ultimately, my goal is to get the other, so I've got 3 sets of these villagers. So ultimately, my goal is to have each set, I'm going to do them a little bit different. So the next set I'll probably do with a lot more tanned flesh tones, and then some ebony flesh tones on the 3rd set. And then the 2nd set, rather than blue, they're going to probably use something like green or red, and then yellow or green on the 3rd. So I want them to be consistent enough that all of them can be intermingled, so they all have the same tones of brown fabrics, browns and tans. Then different skin tones and different colors of accessories, so that while they can all be from the same village and area, they all have some differences and uniqueness about them, but not so much that they become like shining stars. They are not the heroes of the game. They are just NPCs for the characters to interact with. This one here, so this is my Bill Paxton. When I first started prepping him up and everything, he made me think of Bill Paxton. Then, as I was getting ready to start painting him, he made me think of a baker. I don't know if he's necessarily dressed as a baker. Not quite so much. You know, lesser nobleman, not quite super noble. Definitely below the taxpayer, but above just your average villager. All right, we're back to this guy here. Let's get the ultramarine real quick and that highlight, just so we can finish that scarf and finish his hat, or we'll be able to get about halfway on his hat, 2/3 of the way on his hat. But in order to do that, got to do the scarf. And just utilizing the ultramarine blue right over that ultramarine shadow, calling out a little bit of the texture. That'll push that deeper shadow color in. Let us build our highlight on top. And now that we've got that laid on, the final highlight is going to be pretty small comparatively. So I can go in and put the first layer down on the hat. And this is just the oiled leather, just like we did for the glove, or the gloves on the one. Definitely need to give this a moment and do another coat, which is okay because we've got to go through and do that blue lighting anyhow. And I go over a little bit, so I'm going to do a little bit of cleanup here. Just with some water. And then pull that off there. I'll give that a moment to dry as we start moving back through. Now we're moving just to leather. So it's a lot of work, but leather brown. We are going to go through, and in even smaller doses, we're going to just stipple on top on the edging. And a couple of areas where we did that kind of crack through. This is the place where the leather has worn the most. Any spots that you have from your previous layer through stippling and then any like little accoutrements. So this one's got a couple of crossed cords of leather that hold the belt together. I'm actually going to swap out my brush for a size 0 here. To make sure that I get that cordage done really well. And then back to my stippler. And then for these darker leather elements, this is it. This is all you've got. So just edging things like your belt buckle areas. You want to make sure to do just the edge, because as you go through and put that belt buckle in, you want it to look worn. In a couple areas where you carry that through, stipple that in. I don't know how well that's going to show up on camera, but it gives it a really good worn look, worn leather look. Again, I know the camera is not going to do it justice, but that's okay. I'll just check and see how we are for dryness here. Okay, sitting good. Sitting good. Since I'm here, I'm going to do the final highlight on this scarf. So same blues that we used on the others. Very minute areas. I'm going to direct that light tone. That is our blues. And then we can, with our oil leather, just clean up that bit of hat. Make sure we've got a good opaque base so that we can stipple in with leather brown. Get nice clean edges. Really smooth transitions. Just like that. Now he's got that oiled leather hat. And since we've got him in hand, as that is drying, we can go through and on the leather aspects do some stippling. He's got the van braces. This is just leather brown. Stippling on. Give that worn leather look. Really focusing more on the edge than anything else. Of course, that's where the majority of your wear is going to be. As you're sliding those van braces on and off, same with the belt, it's going to rub as you're bending, walking, moving. And then the scabbard, right in the center area, smaller and smaller as things rub against it. Hat dry, we can do a little bit there. Same exact thing that we did with the oiled leather on the belts. We're going to go a little bit bigger Get those edges stippled in anywhere you're wearing. Around the head. Couple of bits moving up and veining out. You're grasping it to pull it onto your head. Around the back. And in this back area too, it has some creases. We want to highlight those out a little bit. And both sides, above and below, on the top. We want to have the sides as well as the top both get some stippling. You don't want it all just on the side or just the top. You want to carry it over and around. So do the sides of the top as well as the top of the top. Because then when you go in and edge that basically with your leather white, it is going to look really, really good. So stipple that in. You know, that's so funky, so challenging to see. But he's now even with where we're at with all of them on leather stippling. Leather stippling. And then the pros are with this here. Then you move right into your boots, where leather brown is your base. And you've already got your paint ready to go. Still moving from your dark to light tones. You just keep following those highlights up. Kid here. Bill Paxton the baker. Bill Paxton, what a good actor. I miss him already. Pardon me, oh my gosh, did not mean to cough in your ear. I don't know if I'd be able to decide what my favorite movie with Bill Paxton is. So many good ones. Near Dark, Terminator, Weird Science, Predator 2. I love Predator 2. There was one I saw not too long ago that he was a dad and he was trying to get his kids to like stop demons, and I was initially kind of twisted because I was like, man, he is crazy. He is playing a crazy man. I don't remember the name of the movie, but it was a good movie. I was kind of like, wow, that was a pretty good movie. Sometimes I go into a movie. I mean, I always try to go into a movie with no expectations or extremely low expectations, as to whether or not I'm going to enjoy it. So I like it when I come out of a movie and I'm like, wow, that was actually a pretty good movie. I'm happy I saw that movie. So I try to keep my expectations low so I can be pleasantly surprised when it happens. I have been watching the Lord of the Rings show, The Rings of Power. Getting into that pretty good. I do wish that it would, like, there's so much going on in so many different places, I guess, that it's a challenge. I have a hard time jumping around like that. I wish they would focus like a little bit more on one aspect or another per show. That's just my preference because I don't want to see just a short scene about one location and one, group or person. I want to see more. Show me more. I don't want to stop and rethink where we're at on this one. Give me more. That's just my own griping. If I were to change something, that's what I would change. But I know there is a lot going on in the show, so you have to be in different places with different groups, so it makes sense. It just, I want more at each location. So this guy could be my villager Jesus too. He's got kind of long hair, but he doesn't have the mustache. Maybe another one will have to be villager Chong. I don't know. I don't know until I have them on the table and my players' characters start interacting with them. I don't know for sure. They've just got their studio personalities currently. There's another one with a couple of ties, so those I'll go through and paint completely. Just about done. Just about done with these leather accents. Then we will call it a day. I hope the show was pretty decent for you. If you're catching us live. If you're catching us on the flip side in a VOD or on YouTube, I hope that it was enjoyable. I hope that you are practicing painting some leather. Don't hesitate to give a comment with an image of how your leather is coming out and what you think of the technique. Or if there's a different technique that you prefer, maybe I'll try that. Let's see what I think of it. Who knows? I always try learning new things, expanding my boundaries, getting out of my comfort zone as much as I can, which is why I took on these darn villagers. I am so ready to be done with. Overall, I'm pretty happy with where they're coming out so far. Pretty excited with what we've gotten done on pack 1 of 3. Of course, it's going to be a little while before I get to the next pack because I am going to have to change it up and break away from the army painting mindset that I've been in for these. But we will see. Who knows? Who knows? Last one that we've got here. Also a couple of cordages there. We want to paint nice and smooth. And then stipple away, stipple away. This one's Stephen King. I declare it is my Stephen King. There we go. Now overall, the next aspect that we will do, which we're not going to do, but I'll do it on this one just to show, will be boots that we will start to paint leather brown. Same exact process. We'll go through and paint these leather brown. Then we'll highlight with tanned leather and then leather white. So that will be the colors that we'll use to do the boots. But we will probably have to go through and hit that camera with my head. Sorry about that. We'll probably have to go through and either put these back onto lids so that we don't have to touch where we've already painted, or give them a quick seal. Just so we're not removing paint. Even like this pouch here, just holding onto this little tiny base is a little challenging. And going through and highlighting with stipples. I just don't think we could do it without them being either secured on a handle or sealed so that I can touch them without worrying about rubbing off paint. But that'll be the next step. Pouches and boots, those type of aspects in leather brown, then tan brown, then leather white. In the meantime, there is our, let me get my brush cleaned here real quick. There is my Stephen King. It makes me think of him in the Creepshow movie. Meteor shit. I don't know why it makes me think of Stephen King. But with his leather belt all done, and then leather boots and pouch started. Still more to go on these villagers, but they were getting closer and closer. If you were able to join me today, I do thank you. I appreciate your time. Hope you enjoyed the technique and just talking about random stuff. So have a great weekend, and until next time, make sure you have a great time painting and enjoying geek culture. Bye-bye.